Thank you and good evening, everyone, for joining myself and Troy Leavitt. Troy Leavitt has been a developer, a producer, a writer, and designer for over 20 years in the gaming industry, having worked on dozens of video games for Disney, including Cars 2, Toy Story 3, and the Disney Infinity series. He has recently gotten back to work with his old Warner Brothers team in Atlanta at Reborn Avalanche Software. He's written a fantasy novel called Cloaked in White, part of the Hymn of Shadow series, and his YouTube channel covers topics from Gamergate, politics, video games, science fiction, net neutrality to, well, just about anything that crosses his mind, it seems. His channel is probably most known for its rebuttal of the Anita Sarkeesian and the sexism in gaming debate. Thank you so much for joining me, Troy.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, Stefan. And just one note that I wanted to clear up. I'm not actually in Atlanta. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. Just kind of FYI. So that's where the Avalanche studio is located.
Right. So, but you're geared with those guys. You're still working with them, I heard.
Yes. Yeah. So what happened is after the closure of the studio and Disney Infinity was shut down, then Warner Brothers picked up, or made a deal with Disney to pick up about half of the existing studio, and then it was reborn under the Warner Brothers label. They've already shipped one title. It was Cars 3, strangely enough, for Disney as a license, and now they're working on a top secret Warner Brothers property that looks very promising. So I'm back working with those guys.
But you are working with them, and you're working remotely, I guess.
No, I'm on site. I live in Salt Lake City, and so that's where they're located as well. So I actually walk across the street to work with them. Yeah,
that is brilliant. Oh, fantastic life work balance there. Okay, cool. Now, first, before we get into all these topics, because you're a writer, I just dawned on me you did actually write a fantasy novel. Why did you want to jump into writing for that particular genre? It's a very specific genre to start writing in.
You know what? That's a pretty good question. I always enjoyed fantasy when I was young, like kind of in my teenage years and stuff. And I really enjoyed, especially like the Dragonlance stuff and Tolkien and things. And so it kind of just became one of those things that I wanted to do for my own satisfaction, to kind of explore some of my own ideas. And it took me a long time because I just did it a little bit on the side here and there. Finally, at the end of 2015, I decided I wanted to finish it off and continue working towards actually making it a trilogy. And so at the beginning of 2016, I self-published it, and I really haven't even looked for a publisher or anything. I just wanted to kind of prove to myself that I had the gumption to finally finish the dang thing. And so I think the reason though why I did fantasy is I wanted to explore, kind of hold up a mirror to our own world, but from a place that's clearly not our own. And that way I wanted to explore especially some notions of religion. And so I worked those into the story. And anybody who reads it and is familiar with various religious tropes will see, those tropes showing up also in the novel. But because it's in another universe, another fantasy thing, it's not in your face about some of the concepts that I think are interesting to me about religious ideas.
Well, your broadcasts or your videos on YouTube involve a smattering of ideas. Do you actually have a routine in the morning where you listen to podcasts or certain people? I know you did one with Ben Shapiro. You had a topic over Jordan Peterson. Is there something that influences you and you're like, okay, I really got to get this out right now? Or is it like, you know what, this week is going to be gaming, next week I'm going to do politics, next week I'm going to do dodgeball? Like what goes through your head every month?
What I started doing is I was listening a lot to YouTube. Now that I'm back at the Warner Brothers studio, I'm not doing it as much, but I would do a lot of YouTube while I was playing video games. And then something would strike me and I'd write a note. Hey, I should maybe do something on this. And then I ended up with this whole book of little notes of things I wanted to cover. And some of them I've never even got back around to. I have, 20 or 30 more ideas. I just haven't really had the time to do it. I mean, one of the main things I've wanted to talk about in some detail is the loot crate controversy in video games. And I did do a podcast with one of my other friends, Knock Fortuna, where we talked that through. But I haven't done a full kind of investigation into what I think it means from both a business standpoint and from a game design and developer standpoint. And I think there are some topics that haven't quite been fully fleshed out yet. But anyway, that's kind of my process. I just listen, come up with something I like, and write a note down.
I remember the topic you mentioned Disney Infinity, and that is unique because in the Nintendo world, there's the Amiibo, there's the Skylander, and I think the Disney Infinity is its own separate system from those things. And it's one of those if anyone doesn't know what these systems are, essentially you have a model of a statue of one of the characters in a popular IP. It has a base, you connect to it, and it downloads information into a game. And with Disney Infinity, I believe, akin to I believe the Kingdom Hearts series, where that's more of a linear story with a whole bunch of, it's like an omnibus of characters from different IPs. Disney takes all the Star Wars and Marvel and Frozen, these big IPs, and sort of makes this sandbox experience. I'm very curious because I know it got shut down, and that's what happened there with you. What was the mindset behind actually building something like this, and how come it actually got canceled?
Okay, so the way that Disney Infinity got started, actually, if we go back to Avalanche's release of Toy Story 3, we had in there kind of this free roaming sandbox area, which a lot of people really enjoyed. We got a lot of feedback from the fans that they thought that was one of the most fun things in the game. So we pitched the idea up to Disney about, hey, we would love to make kind of a sandbox game which used all these different properties, and maybe we would build some toys for it. And Disney initially said, no, we don't think there's a market there. Huh. And then Skylanders came out. And Skylanders came out with their little figures, and Disney saw how well they were doing, and they came to us and said, you know that idea? Maybe you guys should start exploring that idea. But we faced a huge obstacle right up front, and that was that Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, all these different properties are very protective of their intellectual property, and they don't want to mix them. You know, having Darth Vader interact with Buzz Lightyear is a big no-no. And so at first we were like, well, maybe this is dead on arrival. We're not going to be able to mix things. But we went to John Lasseter out there at Pixar, who was head of Disney Creative at the time, and he saw it. And at first he was pretty resistant too, saying, you know, we can't mix our Pixar properties. We can't mix this. But then he got into it, and he thought, you know, if you made this all a separate toy line and made it a point of saying these aren't the actual characters like Buzz Lightyear or Darth Vader. They're not the real characters. They're toys of the characters. And you make everything in the game look like they're toys. Then we might be able to start pitching this, that we're not mixing properties. It's more like a toy line. And he became a champion of that idea for us within the Disney organization. And that was what allowed us to go to all these different producers who own, you know, the rights to their different areas, whether it be Marvel or Lucasfilm or even Jerry Bruckheimer and the Lone Ranger. And each one of them had to sign off on what we were doing before they would let us create the figures and then bring them into the game. So the way Disney Infinity is structured, and a lot of people have asked this question, is that whenever you go into a specific property like the Avengers, you'll note that the play set itself doesn't allow any mixing from the other properties, that you can only play with Avengers specific characters in the Avengers playset, or only with, you know, Star Wars characters in the Star Wars playset. However, we then came up with that idea of the toy box. And the toy box is this free form, almost Minecraft sort of area where you can build and put any toys you want in there, and you can mix and match and create these creations for yourself, just like the idea as where you've spilled out toys on your bedroom floor and you could mix all the different properties together there. So that was the idea behind it. And then it had a strong internet support and following. You know, we had a bunch of fans, and it did very well. So that's kind of the first part. Second part, why did they shut it down? Disney Infinity went from being, you know, a nobody, but through the strength of our IP, and I think through the strength of the game, we became #1 in that toys to life market space. However, it was very, very expensive to produce because we were creating all these toys, and we were doing it on such a short time frame. And our game had all these different play sets, modes, and we were producing a whole new Infinity year after year. So what Disney looked at is they said, the first one was quite profitable. The second one, there were some inventory problems where we had surplus inventory, so our profit margins came down quite a bit, but we were still a little bit profitable. And then on the third one, Infinity 3, they started to see a trend line where they're like, okay, you guys are still making back what we're investing in it, but this is a big, big project, you know, tens of millions of dollars. And they lost confidence that it was sustainable, that if we did an Infinity 4 or continued to produce more in the line, that it would remain profitable enough for them to continue to invest at the level that it needed. And one of the interesting things about Disney is that when they look at something, they target, at least like a 20% return. So if you're not getting a return of that level, of a pretty high return, they'll take the money and they'll put it to something else that they feel they might be able to get a high return on. So Infinity kind of dropped below the bar, even though it never became, a project that was actually losing money.
Wow, those are like 3 games, and they have major IPs from Disney like Frozen and Toy Story, and the second game was all Marvel. And the third game, like these are, I don't know if anyone is aware of the game. It does actually play like Minecraft. It looks like Minecraft, and it's very open worldish. But the models themselves, like I actually saw high quality pictures of them. They look really good. Like I'm not a collector in any sense of statuettes or what have you. But if you were to capture the people who love that sort of going to comic book stores and toy stores, Disney stores, and picking models up, you'd say, hey, I wouldn't mind checking one out. And if there's a digital component, that's kind of like an augmented reality sort of experience for me if I have a game system to go with that. So to me, it was rather interesting, and I'm surprised that to hear that it was doing well and Disney actually stopped it.
It was doing well, but it wasn't doing well enough. One of the interesting side effects is now Disney is releasing, I think they're calling it the Toy Box series of toys, a new line of toys that is based on the Infinity look, but they're selling only the toys without the software component, and it doesn't interface with Infinity in any way. But they recognize that the toys themselves were pretty popular and selling well, so they're continuing to try and make money off the idea, just in a different way.
That's like selling the cart without the horse. Okay, yeah. That's interesting. Okay, now one of the reasons why I wanted to get Troy on, because a lot of us have seen The Last Jedi, and he did his own little stick on how to fix it. Now, what I would have done is, from an editor's point of view, is just, okay, you've got your body of work, the writer has done it. You tweak some stuff, you fix some stuff just to make it a little more clear. Get the Scotch tape and masking tape and whatever glue you can put the whole plot together so it makes sense. And Troy actually went through the story, and he had these 12 quick changes, so that knowing that Disney's not going to cut out all these scenes and not going to start doing reshoots, with the mentality of just giving a little bit of detail and clarification to make the story competent, let alone understandable. Because the story to a lot of people was very, very messy, and he did that. So I felt, oh, my job is done. I didn't have to do anything. He did it for me. So I went ahead and did a fanfic rewrite. So what was your outlook on making this video? Because this is a long video. It must have taken you a few days to walk through and edit and what have you. What was the goal with making that sort of edit?
Well, I've always been a Star Wars fan, and really when I saw The Last Jedi, my initial impression wasn't too bad. But I realized that a lot of it was the music, and I thought they did a much better use of music in The Last Jedi than they did in The Force Awakens. But then as I thought about it, it started to kind of fall apart. The more I thought, the more I said, it wasn't so much that it didn't live up to my expectations. It just felt frayed and incoherent. It felt like it was happening in some different universe almost. It didn't really quite fit the Star Wars property as I understood it. And so I got into this mindset of, well, suppose, and this is what's related, and I don't know if I said this in my video, but I was the game director for what would have been the Last Jedi playset for Disney Infinity.
Ooh.
So I had not yet seen the script though, but I was due to see the script. And so that's kind of where I was coming from. I was like, well, suppose I had this opportunity to see the script, and maybe give feedback when it was way back. What would the sort of things, would I say? So that's where it started. And I know from my experience working in video games and working with a lot of intellectual properties that you can't really rewrite whole things, especially when they've already gone into production and there's a whole bunch of investment. So I was just thinking, if I could just change some of the script lines or just a little tweak here or there, keeping like 95% of the movie intact, could I make it feel a little more like Star Wars and a little more intelligible, I guess is the right word. And it became an exercise for me. And then I just thought, well, I'll share this and throw it out there into the YouTube sphere and see if anybody else thinks. But, you know, of course, I'm not affiliated with Disney, and I had no insight into the actual production of The Last Jedi because they closed the Disney Infinity property right before we were due to start.
Interesting, because Disney Infinity 3.0 did have The Force Awakens in it, and did have Kylo Ren and Rey and Luke Skywalker in there, at least from the old series. So yeah, that's kind of strange that you would have that insight into making a product for Disney that you actually have made, and then you can say, okay, this is a mess. I'm going to try and tweak this so it can work. And it's almost as if it's like no one thought about this going through. I actually watched an interview with Mark Hamill, and a writer, as well as Rian Johnson, and he said that the script was being written during the starting production of The Force Awakens. So he had gotten the script from The Force Awakens. He was reading that. So he didn't know what The Force Awakens was yet. And then he finished his script, and then that was sat on for 13 months, and no one changed it. It was a first draft. Obviously, there were, like, you know, fixes and edits, but nothing was majorly changed. Everyone agreed upon it, all 7 writers, and
wow,
they went to production with that 13 months later. So I was like, what is going on there? Is there some sort of yes man ideology, or is there some sort of politicization of all this? Because if I'm an editor or just a casual Star Wars fan, and I see Rian Johnson's script and I start leafing through it, and I'm like, oh, this is what you did to Luke. Oh, this is what you did to Snoke. This is what you did to Yoda. I'd be like, this is really not going to fly with a lot of people. Is that what's the mentality of Disney, or at least with your experience?
You know, I don't have too much insight into what's going on with the filmmaking side of things. I do know that Disney is very, they care a whole lot about their properties. They really do. And so they spend a lot of time, you know, thinking about what they think will resonate best with their fans. That being said, I think on these particular films that they've given a lot of leeway, a lot of direction to the directors themselves. And I wish I had better insight into it. I can only speak to the, you know, the experience I've had with other Disney properties, which have been different than Star Wars. I have not interfaced directly with Lucasfilm in all my time at Disney, but I have with both Marvel and with Pixar and with Disney feature animation. But the team that worked on The Force Awakens, I was not one of them. The Force Awakens playset for Disney Infinity, were told expressly by Lucasfilm, hey, you have to abide the script that we have given you as tightly as you possibly can, and we want to approve everything. So they were unreceptive to changes or to anything to make the, you know, the gameplay, the playset fit or alter it, that you had to be very close to the storyline. And it was also under very tight wraps, where they actually had a clean room at the office where, you know, if you wanted to work on any assets or see anything that was related to the film, you had to be cleared and then go into this clean room for it. So they treated it like, you know, like it was a diamond or something, like nobody could even interface or check it out unless they were cleared with a high level of clearance. And then you could make no changes. They wanted nothing coming back to them in the way of feedback. It was all kind of a one-way, this is how you're going to do it. And we had a lot of collisions with Lucasfilm as it relates to putting those toys into the toy box in Disney Infinity, because they didn't like how we were treating some of them. And so they actually had to remove some of their powers and abilities and things until they felt like it met with their ideals. Now, I believe that had we gone to the Infinity 4 and work on The Last Jedi, that things would have gotten better, because they would have learned to trust us more, you know, with the property. But at least on the first experience, Lucasfilm was very, very tight on what they allowed people to do.
And this is before the release of the first movie. So this is like 2015, I believe, or around there. So January or December, January. So the movie hasn't come out yet, and you're still trying to, okay, can Rey do X? And you're like, nope. Okay. So you don't know, you can't actually write a character, or you can't actually take a character. You have to guess, and you're like throwing darts in the dark. You're like, okay, how about this one? This one stick? This one stick? And they go, nope, nope, nope. Is that how?
Yeah, that's very much what those guys were dealing with on that team, where they would have to propose ideas, and then they would kind of say, sorry, you know, that doesn't fit with our vision of it, but we can't tell you at this point what's going to happen and that sort of thing. So it was a rough project for those guys to complete.
Okay, that's kind of horrific, at least from a creative idea to do some, you know, brainstorming and just get shot down every week, and then change a character model or change an effect. Oof. Well, let's actually go through some of your ideas that you created, because the ideas are so simple, and it's as if anyone could have, like, hey, why don't we make Finn do more? Why don't we make him more integrated into a story? That I don't know why this wasn't even thought of. It's as if no one decided to say, hey, let's actually put characters together where they should be. Let's actually get their motivations aligned. Let's get some conflict going that might actually arouse some drama, as opposed to making us question what the hell is going on, subvert things. That's the one thing you didn't actually talk about in your 12 fixes, was that you didn't talk about the postmodernism. You didn't talk about how Johnson subverted ideas and expectations. You just sort of said, okay, this is it. You want to do a slightly politicized movie? Fine. I'm just going to make sure that some of the fans can appreciate some nuance of actual storytelling, where there's a conflict and there's a character who has to grow, as opposed to having Rey who just, you know, steamrolls everything. So like one of the first ones was Finn's a spy. It's just so elegant. It's like, yeah, why is he there? Why is he in a sick bay? How do they track people? We don't know. It's a mystery. So you created a mystery. You've created the actual characters in the story guessing how this is happening. Is there a spy? And the audience is going, well, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And then there's the integration with how that plays out with the tracker. And this is another thing which I don't understand, is why they had to destroy all the EU, and then they have Rian Johnson defending all his creative suggestions by producing a book from the EU and saying, okay, well, this is a forced projection. This is where I found it. And the idea that a lot of people had was that you also included was the hyperspace. I think it was a hyperspace nullifier field.
Yeah, and there's I guess there's an interdictor or whatever, right, that could do it. But yes.
Yeah, exactly. There is a ship called the interdictor that can do it. And I'm like, this is such an obvious thing. It's right there. It's on the, you know, it's right in the freaking internet. You just do search for it. And you had that. I'm like, okay, this guy obviously knows, even if you didn't know that, even if you actually didn't search that and do some research, it's an obvious thing to understand how the hell spaceships are having a slow crawl chase scene. Like, it's just bizarre that this would actually cross someone's eyes and go, yeah, this is totally fine. This is, go for it. Just start shooting. So you had that. You had the interdictor, or sorry, the hyperspace nullifier field, I think you called it.
Yeah, I was aware that the other thing existed, but part of my thinking on approaching the film, or any property for that matter, is assuming that your audience may not be familiar with stuff outside of what's contained in the story. And that was part of the issue with Finn that bothered me. The beginning is, I know that he was actually injured at the end of the last movie or something, and so that, you know, supposedly that's why he's in the sickbay at the beginning. But if you didn't remember that from the last movie, it just doesn't, you know, it's never explained. He's just wandering around with hoses trailing behind him. So that's why I thought, you know, well, let's explain a little bit of why he's there, you know, that something's wrong with him and he's getting headaches or something. At least, you know, give a reason so that people who have not seen either the prior film, or it's been, you know, a couple of years, they don't remember it, just drop a single line, you know, let them say something like, how you feeling? What's going on? Just something like that, rather than they just kind of blow it off. To me, a big problem with Finn is they just turned him into kind of a weird comic relief character. And I thought, well, he could be really integrated in a more interesting way. And that, like you said, like he could be a double agent without knowing it. And we could even have something interesting going on with the whole relation to Captain Phasma, and with the what the stormtroopers are like in the future. You know, I don't know. So, but a lot of it to me is thinking about the audience experience of coming to the film. So I'm just going to throw this out there because I think it relates to any time you work with a property. So I feel there are two steps before you even put your first pen to paper, you know, before you write anything. And the first thing is make sure you understand the property really, really well at a deep level. You know, like you have to be kind of a minor expert in it. And the second thing is understand what the fans find appealing about the property. And those should be your guidelines. You should kind of be working between, why the property is there and why the fans like it before you start going off in any new direction. And that's part of what I feel that the mistake was made. Is I've seen all these articles about all fanboys. Who cares what the fanboys think? And I'm like, the fanboys are critical to this. This is what made Star Wars the huge success that it was. You should really be treating them with respect. They're your customers. You wouldn't go and slap your customers around. Why is it like suddenly cool to tell fanboys of Star Wars that if they don't like the film, there's something wrong with them? I feel like that's just topsy-turvy from the way you should be treating your customers.
So in that regard, do you think that this is probably the worst Star Wars movie because it does not deal with build-up? It doesn't deal with expectations of what, not even fanboys, but just people who were paying attention to the first three movies, and then actually the last movie as well. I feel as if Johnson actually subverted what Abrams was doing. It seems as if he just tossed it out the door and said, okay, I'm going to do my own thing. And then... Yeah,
it feels incoherent, doesn't it? Like it's kind of going in a weird direction. That's all. I agree.
Okay, because I was sitting there saying, is this really a Star Wars movie? Even though...
Yeah, exactly.
Like it is space opera, and it does have the same characters, but that's not Luke. Why would Luke act like this way? And you actually look at Luke, he doesn't really do anything. He doesn't physically go anywhere. He talks to Rey. I mean, he gives her some guidance in offhand sort of way, but he doesn't really like. There's no inclusion. He doesn't actually involve himself in the plot. I mean, you can argue that a stalling tactic is in a scene. Yes, obviously something happened there, but he was never in any harm. He was never, well, until he actually died for reasons.
Yeah, mysterious reasons.
Yeah, so I was looking at the other ideas, and they all sort of make logical sense, like giving the relationship between Luke and Rey this master student attitude right off the bat, sort of Mr. Miyagi. I was going with the Master Po, Kwai Chang Caine vibe, where he's sort of like this ridiculously powerful dude, and he's just sort of looking at this student who wants this person's help, but he's not mentally ready. He's not socially prepared for this sort of psychological experience. And you just took that and said, okay, let's see if the basic thing, which is patience, and that's the idea I got from your idea, which I pretty much stole and used that as the I wouldn't say the second climax, but as the main quality that people can relate to and say, okay, she has to learn to chill out, because throughout the entire movie, she's always wide-eyed and wide-mouthed and running around, and everything works for her. It's like, okay, we got to give her something to have her calm down and give her some challenge, because I don't think people actually like a Mary Sue. And I've read articles of people who don't think she's a Mary Sue. There's Eric Kane on Forbes who argues against that, and I'm just like, I don't know if this is a critical thing. People who don't know a literary criticism understand these terms or actually want to care. They just see a well done movie and go, wow, this is beautiful. There's all kinds of wonderful sets and special effects and practical effects and great music. I'm entertained. Yeah, if you want to see it as a surface thing, great. But when you get to the meat of it, there's nothing there. It's just a bunch of people running around. And it's like everyone's desperate to survive, but it's everything gets contrived, and then there's all these Deus Exes running around. It just it makes you feel so sad. So giving meaning to Luke was, for me, for you and your 12 Fixes was great.
Well, and I agree. If I remember right, in your suggested fixes, the notion of patience, that seemed to me a good way to address kind of the Mary Sue issue, because I felt it too. Part of what struck me wrong is that I never felt like Rey is ever in any danger through the whole thing. There's a few moments with Snoke, but for the most part, she just everything she puts her mind to, she just blows right through it. And there's never really an explanation for why. And it did feel like, I don't feel this character is learning anything or going anywhere. It just didn't. Now, I guess some people have felt differently, but yeah, I got the Mary Sue vibe myself, that I would have found her much more believable and much more likable if she had to struggle some, if she had to learn something. And I have a hard time feeling that she's learned anything through this experience. At least, I don't know. I didn't get it, if there's something there. And so, yeah, I felt like Luke needed to teach her, and I don't know what she learned from her whole experience from Luke. I don't, you know.
Yeah, I have nothing against Luke going into, a cave or hovel and just living his life that way. That's fine if you want to do that with a character. I think that's great, and to show his sense of redemption, or the attempted murder, or the idea of an attempted murder. That's fine. Great. You could go with that. It's how it's done. So all these ideas are fine on the paper. It's how they're expressed, and this is where you actually go in and change things with. Well, you actually cut out a lot of things with the Leia scene. You give Akbar a role. You actually explain, or attempt to explain, Holdo's reasoning for not sharing the plan, which is, I mean, I would just scrap the idea entirely.
Yeah.
But then I realized that would ruin the entire story. And you say, okay, let's give him a reason, and that is connected back to Finn and connected back to Canto Bight, and that was the one thing I that we talked about this before we started, was Canto Bight. You kept it in, and obviously you don't want to remove all this amazing production value, as ridiculous as it was, but you tried to say, okay, let's keep it in there and give it some value and make it as if Finn was being tracked through all this time. And that's why I was thinking, maybe if somehow the First Order was like, they lost their ability to track because Finn's gone, and that's their little life pod, or whatever, the candle in the dark, and it's gone. It's like, oh crap, now what are we gonna do? We only see them visually. So, and then he comes back, it's, oh, everyone's fine, and Hux is like pulling his hair out, like, what do we do? What do we tell Snoke? And then he comes back, oh, we're fine, it's okay. Like that would have been something I would have liked to have seen with the character, because they took most of the men. They either made them incompetent, or considered to be unworthy of their status. And I don't know. I think it has to do with the politicization of these movies, and I don't know why. And as you said, they should understand their demographic. They should understand the actual people, who are mostly, I guess, middle-aged men now, if we talk about the original, or even the prequels, who go to these movies. They want to see these things. And there was no scene that I saw of two lightsabers hitting each other. There was maybe a vibroblade, or whatever those Praetorian guards were, that had these weird staves and blade things. And even that fight scene, if I've seen a video of people who've criticized that, as as spectacular as it looked, it was all favoring, like, there was like 3 Praetorian guards attacking Rey, all with a downward chop, so she would just block one with one sword swipe. It's like, okay, can maybe attack her at the same time from 2 different angles, or 3 or 4. So it was constant. Oh yeah, she's not going to lose. We know, we don't have to watch it. She's going to win somehow.
Right. Yeah, and I felt that way. I'm at kind of a deeper, almost philosophical level. I believe that what made the first Star Wars movies resonate so much, besides all the the cool visuals and stuff, was that it was the hero's journey. That Joseph Campbell retelling of thousands of myths, kind of consolidated here into a new story here, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And you see this hero's journey played out again with the young boy who has to be taught by the old wizard, to go out and perform this great quest. And there's even kind of a princess rescue. You see a lot of these tropes in there that have endured the test of time. And it actually speaks, I believe, to the heroic aspects in many of us. And that's why it resonates so much. You identify with Luke, or you identify with Han, and even Princess Leia, all these kind of heroic impulses. You come fast forward to The Last Jedi, and it seems like a lot of that is really murky or lost. Luke doesn't feel like the wise hero, or the wizard now, which is the role I think he should be playing. He just feels like a grumpy old petulant man for most of the film, right? and so it loses that. And Rey doesn't feel like the humble farm girl or whatever going out to learn. She's like Super Mary Sue, who does everything kind of magically without understanding why. And the whole resonance that I think we had kind of with our past storylines is lost. And so it doesn't feel, at least to me, it didn't feel very much like a Star Wars film, but it felt like more of a kind of science fiction-y opera thing, using Star Wars elements without understanding kind of that core underlying hero's journey. And I would have been fine. You know, I don't care that Rey is female. That didn't really bother me that much. But I did feel like, well, she needs to learn stuff and overcome stuff and grow like we've seen in those heroes' journeys. And she should have the mentor and Luke. And it just felt sloppy to me. And I don't know that I would say it's the worst film, because I really didn't like the very first prequel. You know, that one was pretty low on my list too, but it's pretty low.
Well, that was similar to how people took Rogue One as a form of fanfic that you know, tried to, well, it used obviously the Star Wars brand and told its own thing, and you know, tried to do something different. It was kind of, to me, it was kind of like the Titanic. I never actually have seen it, but you know how it's going to end, so it's like, okay, great, whatever. But at least they try to do something different, and I think that was at least a good attempt. Whether it was successful, I can't argue because I haven't seen it, so I shouldn't argue. I shouldn't talk either way. But yeah, the same way that the Last Jedi, it felt that they just handed it to someone and they just approved everything he said because they had all these strong women. At least I cannot understand Kathleen Kennedy's reasoning with 6 other writers, you know, sitting there going, okay, yeah, he's got Leia, he's got this, he's got that, and that's all we want. And subvert everything else. People will go crazy. It's different. It'll drive them nuts. I guess they must have done some type of testing beforehand, like a screening before, say, okay, we have, was it 3 months to release? We're going to start screening, see how it works, see how it goes. I'm sure some executive would be like, okay, we gotta figure out how it's going to go. We're going to project our earnings the first week, the first 2 weeks, and It seems as if they didn't really care. It was like, yeah, it's flashy. It's got, you know, John Williams. It's got great music. It's got great sound. We got all this great practical effects. I remember the story on the the sea moose. That's a real prop, and they had to ship it in from the States to Ireland, and it's 2 people. It's 2 people in the thing. They have to cut the neck through. They have to go down there. They have walkie-talkies to talk to each other. They have all this electronics in there to move things, and when Hamill comes over to milk the thing, they have a little dispenser, and everything is just so ridiculously expensive and over the top that you probably could have gotten some really good CGI guys to do that in about, you know, a 20th of the cost and time and what have you. So I was just awed, as everyone else was, with the visuals and the sound and the score and all the crescendos and all that. But I'm sitting there going, there's nothing here. There's nothing here. This, you know, Rey's not doing anything. She goes to the dark side so easily, and then she just walks out of there like it's nothing. It's like, okay, that was strange. What was the point of that? Finn is worthless. Rose is worthless. They actually hurt the plots. They damage the plight. Holdo is holding the entire story together by saying nothing and doing nothing. And
yeah, it felt pretty contrived. You know, I agree with you. It had beautiful production value. You could tell there was a lot of money spent on this, and that you know, all the pieces were there, but there didn't seem to be the heart. There didn't seem to be the center. But Liana Kersner, who's my friend, and she liked it. You know, she's got her channel, talks about video games as well. And what she said about The Last Jedi, that a lot of what stuck out to her was that it looked like they were going from toy manufacturing opportunity to toy manufacturing opportunity. Like they just kept introducing things that they felt that they could, you know, turn around and sell or merchandise, and that there was a whole bunch of like background characters and ships and things. That's how she viewed it, which I thought was interesting. And actually, having worked for Disney, I could see that may have been a consideration. You know, let's see how we can monetize this via, you know, sales of toys.
Interesting, because there's been really bad sales of toys for the past, well, not only during Christmas, but even today. They pulled them from shelves in China for sure. There's all these videos of people walking through toy stores that just, they're in discount bins and no one's buying the Rose figures. No one's buying the $200 Millennium Falcon marked down to like $70. No one's buying that. And if you're talking about the marketable things, I'm thinking like Porgs and what have you.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know why they went so hard on that, but when I read interviews or listened to interviews, the invention of the Porg came about because the island they were filming on with the Luke scenes, there were all these birds, and they were messing up the shots. So instead of actually using CGI or computer post-production to cut them out, they said, okay, fine, we'll have some scenes and we'll make our own animal and stick them there. I thought that was kind of intelligent to say, okay, we're gonna use the set as best we can. Now, the other animal, which was the crystal foxes or whatever they were, I'm not sure. I guess a planet covered in sodium or whatever kind of salt that was, some ionic structure would naturally lend itself to some sort of organism developing a skin or hide that was crystalline in nature. Okay, yeah, I could see some sort of bioorganic adaptation. Cool. I don't know if I haven't seen a porcelain figure or any sort of crystal fox thing you could buy. I'm sure they're out there, but yeah, it's mostly been the action figures, the larger, like the was it 3 feet ones of the ATSDs, and porg socks, porg one of those sticky things you put on your car, just large, like 5-foot porgs. There's all these ridiculous sizes of all sorts of penguins and seals put together, and trying to be cute.
I have no insight into how the actual merchandising has gone, but it sounds like you may know something. I did hear that Star Wars has done fairly poorly overseas, like in China in particular, I guess. And to me, I feel that speaks to the lack of heart in the story, because I think that those kind of storylines are universal. And so, the other movies, I believe, did significantly better. And then this one just, tanked right off the edge. And that to me is just, it's a failure of story. It's not a failure of production. It wasn't a failure of even the characters or anything else. It was a failure of how the story was told. At least that's how it feels to me. But I don't honestly know what the Disney numbers are. They might be looking at them and be completely happy, but it looks from the outside like they've got to be going, oops, this was a little disappointing.
They've certainly made over $1 billion in a bit. So I understand that. I'm curious what the production cost, whether it's 700 or 800 million. It has to be way up there for the amount of practical effects as well as the CGI, and especially the Canto Bight. As I mentioned, the Mark Hamill interview said that Canto Bight was the most opulent set he's ever seen of all his career. So yeah, I can't imagine what they've done and how it was written in stone from the beginning to say, okay, we don't, we're not doing any reshoots, everything's great, and we're just going to polish it until the last 2 months or the last 3 months are ready to go. But yeah, I mean, your stuff just made me smile, and I was happy to watch it. I downloaded a copy. I was like rewatching it. Okay, what did he say here in this point?
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I enjoyed watching yours too. And I think that it's kind of interesting how many people have done this, and that to me speaks to the appeal of the Star Wars property. That some people are just angry and they're upset with it, but then I think there's a lot of us who said, I still really want to love Star Wars, and so you come back to it and say, how do I kind of save this?
Yeah, and everyone is looking to the extended universe. I'm looking to the KOTOR games. I'm even looking to the Old Republic games, which they're not that bad. I mean, now there's all this DLC and stuff with it, and I don't know if BioWare is going to keep it on for another year or two, but those games have all the philosophy and all the problems that the simplicity of the space opera genre of the first 3 films did, that never really expanded upon what the Force was, never really talked about the conflict between light and dark, what it means to be a Jedi, why is a Jedi flawed. And then you look at the extended universe with all the books and the comics. There are dark Jedis, there are entire species that are born Force sensitive, there are gray Jedis. There's, I think the Palpatine had his own order of Inquisitors that were Jedi or were Sith. So there's all kinds of variations that have depth and meaning, and things that hardcore, not necessarily hardcore Star Wars fans would enjoy, of course, but people who like stories in general. Like, we all know that Joseph Campbell was a teacher to George Lucas. That's why it turned out the way it did. Now, George always was a very eccentric fellow, and his ideas for a production that big were kind of strange, as we've heard over the years, even in the 70s and 80s, of what the actors were talking about. Like C-3PO is supposedly going to have a used carsman sales voice, and Like all these silly, weird things that was like, oh, and then the edit, we heard about the edit that happened to the first movie that wasn't for his wife at the time and another person. We've gotten a very, very different movie. So it's, again, the editor that saves the day for these simple stories that go on too long. And 2.5 hours is a really long time to be sitting in a theater for a space opera. Let's talk about other, Marvel properties. I guess they do similar lengths, like Thor Ragnarok and what have you. But I can't see myself wanting to go to another one. I can't see.
Yeah, I've lost my enthusiasm too. I'm kind of like, well, I don't really care if I see the next one now.
Yeah, it doesn't really cross my mind. There's been no hooks. There's been no setups. There's been nothing. They literally ended where they started. And I don't know if that was the point. Like Rian Johnson just wanted to just laugh at people. Like he wanted to just slam everyone's fan theory. Like I remember that was a big thing on Twitter. He actually would say in a little post-it note saying your fan theory of whatever sucks. I'm gonna burn it all. And I guess Abrams is gonna somehow be a phoenix and just create something magical this time through. I don't know.
Yeah, I really don't know what to think. I guess we've got Solo coming out here pretty soon. Now that's Ron Howard, right? I think.
They've changed directors. They fired the two guys who did a comedy movie, and they've reshot 3 times. So that's questionable. It's hard to say. I did read a report about a screening that a fan got from a con that got to see a trailer before, because they haven't released anything yet, and they saw a trailer and they thought the trailer looked very good. So trailers are designed to look good. So I don't know if that's a very good gauge of determining how authentic the experience is going to be. But I don't know if anyone is excited about it. I don't know anyone who's like, ooh, can't wait to see the Kessel Run and whatever else, however Han gets his blaster. I don't know. Like I really don't know anyone who's geared up. I think the only one would be the Han Solo movie, or not the Han Solo, sorry, the Obi-Wan movie. I think that people are excited over because they know Obi-Wan, they know his character. They can't screw it up. They can't subvert it for us. You can't have him going around having children, or you can't have him going around murdering people. Like it's Obi-Wan. We know the guy. We saw him in the prequels. We saw him in the originals. There's no change, so they can't screw that up, and people are expecting that not to be screwed up.
So you mentioned Marvel earlier. What do you think of the Marvel series of films?
I haven't really watched too many, so I can't say. I have seen the Ragnarok a few months ago. That was, every Marvel film, to my understanding, is different. They put a different spin. They give it, focus on drama, focus on comedy, focus on fun. So they seem to be doing a very formulaic solution for a genre that is tested and works. So it's kind of like put through the machine, and they know they're going to do this and this and this. I really like the director from Ragnarok. I saw his previous movie that he starred in, What We Do in the Shadows, which is a vampire.
Australian. Yeah. I've seen that. That's really enjoyable. That's a really
that was brilliant. Yeah, I thought that was great, and he sort of, for better or for worse, put that level of comedy. And of course, Chris Hemsworth he's a guy who can do anything. So whether or not you liked the Ghostbusters movie, he was that was his improv. He knows what he's doing. So to have him be as a goofy, weird god, he's talking to a skeleton in the opening scene. You're like, what? Who are you talking to? Why are you doing this? So some of the jokes are extended for the sake of it. That's why it was a long running time. But it's always new, and they're not taking themselves too seriously in that regard, which is good.
I believe that Marvel has handled their properties quite well in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Every one I've seen, I come away going, that was pretty good. That held together. I'm not like this huge Marvel fanboy, so I haven't read a lot of the comic books, but so I go into the films having an expectation of a fun, enjoyable comic book movie that's got action, it's got some humor, and it always delivers. I always come away going, this feels good, and it feels like there's this great continuity between the films, so it makes me want to see the next one.
Exactly.
Each one comes out, and there's a part of me that's like, I think Marvel's doing it right. Lucasfilm needs to look over at what Marvel's doing and say, hey, those guys those guys are doing really well. We should maybe emulate them more, be truer to our properties, which I feel like Marvel has done with their cinematic universe, even if they've screwed up their comic books, at least from what I've heard. I don't follow it that closely, but they decided they wanted to go all social justice. But I am looking forward to the new Black Panther movie.
Yes.
Even though I know almost nothing about the Black Panther. Exactly. I just have a feeling it's going to be good.
The only thing that the latest news I saw was the Captain Marvel movie. They were doing some behind the scenes photography. I can't remember the actress's name who's portraying her, but her suit is green. So I'm assuming they're doing a lot of green screen techniques on her suit to make it do whatever. So that might be a little odd, but again, this is all off to the side, behind the scenes. Who knows what they were doing? Who knows how the suit works? Who knows how the cinematography works? So that was a little strange. I don't know anyone who's actually actively interested in the Captain Marvel series or the brand, but again, we're talking about Marvel, who can take various IPs from the 70s, like Guardians of the Galaxy, and make it hip. But
right, yeah, what a beautiful job they did with that property, by the way.
Yeah, for better or for worse, again, there are some really weird things about that. Like they'll just have licensed music, and that'll be the soundtrack for like 20 minutes, like just all these tracks playing, which works, of course, if you're old or young. They're good tunes anyway. And yeah, it's just slapstick and action and space opera, which is exactly perfect for the genre. So yeah, I mean, they're doing the right job, and I'm just so sad that DC can't give them the IP and have them work, because I'm sure they'll be happy to take their classic figures and give them the proper treatment they deserve. I can't believe that Schneider butchered it as. I mean, okay, making Batman the entire vibe of all the movies is like, oh my God, why would you do that? And I remember JLA. My brother used to buy JLA comics. They were really bad comics. They were like every panel had like, okay, it's Aquaman's turn. Okay, now it's Wonder Woman's turn. And then and it was just this weird smorgasbord of just things happening. And you're like, I can't follow this. There's just so many characters and so many bizarre stories coming together. So you look at a Marvel comic, the X-Men, Generation X, some of the not the Elseworlds, that's DC, but some of the what ifs, they are very creative and very, very unique. And Jack Kirby and all the ideas from that time, that's where you get all your inspiration from. That's where you get all these crazy, wonderful imagery like Silver Surfer and the Thing and Galactus, and that's interesting. Those are really off the wall characters, and to give it the Stan Lee writing effect of letting the artist create scenes and him filling in the blanks to humanize these people. As bad as some of the reboots of, what was it, Spider-Man were, they were still entertaining movies as bad movies. They were still entertaining. You could watch them again and laugh at them, as opposed to no one really wants to see JLA or their version of Justice League on the silver screen. No one really wants to see the what was the one with Will Smith and
oh yeah, the Suicide Squad or
Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
oh,
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah,
they feel the DC movies in comparison to the Marvel movies, they feel joyless. Like it's that they throw in a few little jokes, but they just don't feel like the characters, or for that sake, the audience is really enjoying them that much. At least when I've gone, I always kind of feel like this feels kind of heavy. Now I know that there are fans of DC and more power to them, but for me, the Marvel treatment being lighter and more, kind of boom pow sort of approach to things just resonates with me better for my dollar in the theater.
Oh yeah, I mean that's how I enjoyed going to see Deadpool. That I really wanted to see Deadpool.
Deadpool was a lot of fun. Yeah.
That and then there was Logan, and I was like, oh my God, these are fantastic movies, and they're just so different. and they could do that, and they got away with it because Logan was a real risk. Deadpool was a big, such a difficult story to get that movie made, and it was such on a budget, and it was so fourth wall breaking. And wow, what a great time to be enjoying movies. It's just this ridiculous character who's designed to do that. Okay, we have very little time left, so let's actually go to the chat. I don't know, there's not too many people in here asking me questions, but let's just see how we have here. Okay, thank you, Papa G. I find it interesting how Smudboy says Marvel is always different. When one common criticism is that a lot of Marvel movies feel samey, at least based on detractors. I can't say how samey they've been. I have not seen a lot. I've not seen the Avengers. I haven't really seen any of the Thor movies aside from the last one. I've maybe seen the first Iron Man movie, so I'm really out to lunch to how samey they've been. But they've been entertaining on different genres, or at least different themes. So it's never the same going through. It's always like a focus on comedy, a focus on adventure, a focus on, I think The Dark World was kind of like a serious-ish movie. I haven't seen it, but yeah, I think that's the vibe that gave away.
Yeah, I agree with kind of the criticism that they kind of follow a very similar story arc. You can almost predict how they're going to go and where they're going to end. But the way that they've interlinked them from, a different movie property to different movie property with the little cameos and the different things kind of does a great job of build up, in my opinion, towards these big epic ones. Like the first one, the Avengers Civil War, felt like a great coming together of all those different storylines. And now we're looking forward to Infinity War, and I've got that same excitement that I want to see all the characters together. And
well, yeah, I've actually read when I was a kid, I read the Infinity War, or the Infinity Gauntlet, I think it was Infinity Gauntlet series, and it's obviously it's a lot different than in the movies. And what I remember about that was very similar to what I described about how the JLA was like, okay, this panel, because there's so many heroes, and they just threw them into this weird platform, and they're fighting the bad guy there. And it's just like, okay, here's Wolverine. He does his death blow, and then he gets incinerated. And then here's this guy, and he does this, and he gets incinerated. It's like, okay. So as long as they stay away from that sort of vibe of just throwing IPs at the Infinity guy,
right,
and they get thrown away. As long as they stay away from that Saturday morning cartoon feeling of weird, plasticky people, yeah. So I'm a little cautious of wanting to see that, but I am interested. I do want to know what happens. I want to know if they have. What was that guy's name? Adam Warlock, I think that was the main character, who is the Heartstone or the Heart Gem. Oh, it's been a while since I remember. Yeah, it's just a really crazy story about how these things work and what they represent. But anyway, guys, I don't see any other questions. If you have anything for Troy, head on over to his channel. He's got all kinds of interesting political, aka gaming, aka also, I don't know, all sorts of topics that I'm sure one of you will appreciate. And give him a like. I'm sure you'll like what he has to say.
All right, Stefan. Thank you. I've enjoyed our chat here. It's been fun to talk and just kind of go around a little bit about story construction and what appeals to us.
Oh yeah, I really like your content. I hope the best, whatever happens with Disney this year and next, and hopefully they understand the quality of work that you do. And it seems I saw that video you posted that was privately listed. It's like, oh, these guys, they're hardcore. These guys are really into their job. So I'm sure everyone on your team will appreciate all the work you guys are doing together. And we, of course, will see what kind of new products and money you'll make for Disney and all the other things.
It's actually Warner Brothers now. So
okay, well, yeah. Very similar concepts in the game market.
Yeah. So we're working on different properties now. No longer working with Disney at all.
Oh, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for spending time with us, and good night.
All right. Thank you.